everybody is really craving that adventure that is going to take them somewhere unexpected.
Welcome back to another episode of the Basalong Cycling Show. I'm your host Sherry. Can you imagine going on your honeymoon to the toughest ultra race in remote Kyrgyzstan? Well, you cannot miss the upcoming story. But before we jump into the episode, I want to personally invite you to subscribe if you haven't already, whether you are watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and to rate the show. It means a lot to me. Plus, you join our amazing community so you don't miss the upcoming races, videos, and episodes. And your comments really help to shape the channel, so let me know who you want to see next on the show or topics you are interested in. And check the description below for exclusive discounts in Bicycle, Albion, Redshift, and more. Let's jump into it. Joining me today is Mel Webb. She is an ultra-endurance cyclist and founder of the Detours Cycling Podcast. Welcome to the show, Mel.
Thanks, Sherry. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm really excited to have you in the show. We met for the first time at Atlas Mountain Race. You were doing there an amazing job with the media team running around riders, but you are an ultra-endurance cyclist yourself. So tell me, how did you start it in ultra-endurance cycling and also getting involved in the races? What motivates you?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the thing that motivates me the most, I would say, is getting more women on start lines. It didn't always start that way. I found the bike. I always had a road bike and commuted when I was doing other sports and stuff like that. And then in 2020, I was running marathons. I broke my leg skiing and I got a plate and 6 screws in my right leg. And the doctor was like, "Oh, marathons are a bad idea." And I was like, "You don't know who I am." And he was sort of right, because running actually did hurt more having the hardware in my leg. So I started riding my bike more. And then I started heading off road. I bought a gravel bike on Facebook Marketplace and I was immediately hooked. And I was like, okay, I want to go like further afield. And I think it was the Silk Road Mountain Race film or something around the Silk Road Mountain Race. And I was like, bike packing, that seems like the thing I want to do. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, this is what I want to do. So I bought all these bags that were entirely wrong for my bike because that's what my boyfriend had at the time. But I was hooked. And so that's how bike packing started. Silk Road Mountain Race was my first bike packing race ever because I saw that film and I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And in hindsight, I probably should have picked something easier because I got really sick. I scratched really early on, but I'm also really happy that I did that race first because it totally changed my life, introduced me to all these amazing people, introduced me to Nelson, and now I work for the races. So that was 2022 and now it's 2025. So 3 years ago. And I look back and I'm like, wow, I had no idea that doing that thing would lead to all of these other things. And then how I ended up working on the media team, Nelson and I became quite good friends, and then we've just talked a lot about the races, and I started working on a retainer with him in November as the media manager. And the intention was that I would just go to Atlas to do the podcast and media, and I was supposed to race Silk Road again this summer. Oh, wow. And things just went too well. And I said to him halfway, I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to race Silk Road. And he was like, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but we would really like you to do media. So here we are, and it's quickly becoming something that is taking over my life in a really good way.
Wow, that's really impressive. I always think how people decide to do one of the most difficult races in the world as the first one. It's and you take it in such a positive manner. I will say, and it's quite interesting. We have a similar background. I was also into running, then I was getting injured all the time, and then you find cycling, and it's like, oh, I can do this, but for longer, without getting injured. And I think pushing your limits is quite addictive. And I see you've done since since Silk Road, also the other mountain races like Hellenic Mountain Race, Atlas Mountain Race, and is
Yeah.
gaining popularity. What do you think is so special about these races? From my experience, I would say they are quite different to all the other ultra races I've done.
Yeah, I think what makes the mountain races so special, and obviously I'm biased because I'm part of the organization, but the reason before I even started working for the races, I kept coming back was one, the people. I think it's a very eclectic mix of slightly unhinged but really remarkable people that you would never meet in your day-to-day life, and everybody is really craving that adventure that is going to take them somewhere unexpected. I think that's the thing I love most about Nelson's routes is you end up in these crazy places and you're like, how did I get here with my bike of all things? And you'd probably never do that in your day-to-day life or if you were planning a route. Uh, and I think that that's something special is there's so rarely these opportunities to just do something that you never thought you could do or that you couldn't even imagine. And so that's why I love the routes and the people are just the best. I think since I went to Silk Road in 2022, it's like the same cast of characters that go over and over and over again. Um, and it's kind of like you go back because you just hope you're going to see all your friends, and they all seem to come to these races.
Oh wow! And from the three, which one is your favorite? If you had to choose, or what would you say is like okay, something special about each race?
I mean, there's something completely different about each race. I think my favorite is Silk Road because it is just so wild and the mountains, the sheer scale of them is incredible. I, the landscape is amazing and yeah, that one I think is my favorite, especially because like I'm a slower rider and so if you actually look at the time cutoffs, Silk Road is the most air quotes approachable one when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to time cuts. You don't actually need to ride that fast every day. You don't have to ride as far as the other races. And so on paper, it's much more approachable. Obviously, there's crazy things that happen. You have altitude, you could get sick. But I think the wildness of that one is my favorite. And then, like, they're hard to compare. I think I like the like rocks of Morocco. I think that it's
Mm-hmm.
just like it feels like you're riding on Mars. February sunshine is also amazing. And then
Yeah.
Hellenic, the food is so good. Like you can get really good food the whole time, and there are pockets of it that feel super wild. Like there's this one mountain pass after this big town, Metsovo, which there's a loop you go through, and you're like, wait, am I in Kyrgyzstan? This is crazy. Similarly, there's another one after CP2 that is like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd go Silk Road and then I'd tie Hellenic and Atlas because they're just so different.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with the food in Greece. In TCR was the best bakery. I was like, okay, I'm happy to be in Greece just because of the bakery. It's
Yeah.
so good. I wish I could just stay there forever.
Yeah, baklava, French fries, gyros, like, and the people are so friendly. Like, we would go into taverns at night, and you'd have to be a little bit pushy because people want you to stay and hang out and have a really good time. And you're like, no, I'm actually in a race. Like, we need to keep going, but you want to interact with the locals. And yeah, it was just the food was so good, and the people were so friendly. So I think that one is like maybe a bit more approachable than others because it's a bit more Western.
Mm-hmm.
But the food is kind of the highlight.
Yeah, and for example, I saw you did Silk Road Mountain Race as your honeymoon. I thought racing as a pair is crazy, but doing the toughest race in the middle of a country that is very challenging and wild. How did
Yeah.
you manage that? How was the experience racing as a pair and your honeymoon?
Um, it was amazing. I think if we had just done the race and not toured beforehand, it would have been less honeymoon vibes. We did like a 5 or 6 day tour beforehand to get acclimated. We could take things slow. We were just hanging out, reading our books on our Kindles. And then the race itself, the reason we went back as a pair was because in 2022, I think it was like the first mountain pass I got to the top, and I just was like, I wish I had somebody to share this with. Um, and that's not to say that I don't like racing solo, but I think because of how wild and just like it felt like maybe this is the only time in my life I'm ever going to do this. Uh, I wanted Jake to be there, and so we got married. It wasn't supposed to be our honeymoon, but the way that the timing worked out, we were like, okay, we'll go back in 2025. We got married, or 2024, sorry. We got married in June, and we're like, okay, I guess people just started calling it our honeymoon. So we're like, okay, I guess it's our honeymoon now.
Mm-hmm.
But it is our preferred way to spend time together. And um, yeah, the experience was amazing. It ended pretty abruptly. My pedal broke with 200K to
Oh
go,
no.
and that would have been fine. Jake was going to ride in on the pedal. It was like falling off the spindle, and so he gave me his, and then my pedal started stripping his crank. So it was
Oh.
falling out of his crank. So we were now down to one pedal. He had no, or not three pedals. Sorry, I can't do math. And he was basically riding one legged, and we thought maybe I'll go on by myself, but we came as a pair. It was our honeymoon, and we probably could have problem solved and gotten to a welder. Like, all of this is hindsight 2020. It's really hard to like figure these things out in the moment. So yeah, we scratched with 200K to go, which was devastating, and I think put a little bit of a sour taste on the whole thing. But when I look at the experience, it was like I loved the entire race. I felt like we did a really good job of taking care of ourselves and pushing hard while also like enjoying everything.
Looking for some extra cash? Well, check in your garage. I've been using Bicycle to sell my old bikes, and you can do it too. It's an online marketplace for pre-owned bikes, and maybe there you can also find your new one. Honestly, it's super quick, easy, and reliable. So make sure to check the link in the description to get an exclusive discount, or you can go to bicycle.com/Sherry. Again, bicycle.com/Sherry. What are you waiting for? Time for a new bike. That's amazing that there's more crazy people
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
ultra races as a pair, because is the way they like to spend their holidays. And you not only did Silk Road, but then you did Hellenic also as a pair.
Yeah, Hellenic was the first time we ever raced as a pair. We did the first edition, and it was like crazy, crazy rainy. And nobody knew what to expect. And also, like, that was our first time racing as a pair. So we definitely learned a lot. We took too much stuff. Uh, like, Jake is a better technical rider than me, and uh, I like to sleep, but also like I'm the one who advocates for less sleep. Anyways, it was like we got into situations where like some mornings we wouldn't be moving very quickly because I'd just be like, no, another alarm. And he's too nice and he won't be like, Mel, get up. And so we had to learn to be like, someone needs to push, and someone, like, when one person is, not wanting to move forward, the other person's got to push. And it was a really valuable experience to figure out just like how to communicate with one another when we're doing these things. I mean, we'd done a lot of bike packing, but it's different in a race because there is, the time constraints and stuff like that. But yeah, that one was crazy. The weather was just horrific.
And how do you cope with the difficulties as a pair? Do you establish rules beforehand, or you practice your strategies? Because I know there's a lot of conflicts during ultra races.
Yeah, I get really hangry. If I don't eat enough snacks, I get really cranky. I'm not very nice. And so, one, I try to stay on top of my fueling, but also, I've learned that if I am feeling particularly mean, I just don't talk because I'm probably going to say something that I will regret later. So if I'm really cranky, I try not to talk. Jake usually knows that, like, if I'm being really quiet, that means I'm probably not feeling particularly nice. We have periods of the day where, one of us will listen to music, one of us won't. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is just like being honest with each other and saying, this is too much for me, or I need you to like really support me in this thing. Like, especially nighttime, I get really freaked out. And so I like to have conversation at night. I'll be like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
keep talking. Talk to me about anything, any random thing. And those are things that we've worked on together. And then, yeah, the thing about like getting up in the morning and stuff, we like to have like a morning captain. So one person who's like in charge of making
Oh,
sure we
wow.
get food in. And then the other person is like packing up and maybe like if we have to download a map or something like that, and trying to just like delegate roles a little bit. Also, like going into a resupply. Okay, I'm going in and doing the shopping, and Jake is like lubing chains, fixing anything on the bike so that when I get out, we can just pack up and go pretty quickly. And these are things that we just keep working on as time goes
Mm-hmm.
on.
And did you both started ultra cycling together, or how did you decided one started ultra cycling and got the other one into it, or you just decided to take on an adventure together?
We started bikepacking like as soon as we met each other, and he had done some bikepacking trips before. So I was brand new and I was kind of learning from him. And then Silk Road was both of our first races. We raced solo. He
Mm-hmm.
finished, and he was just coming off of he raced professionally on the road in North America. So he was like super, super fit. He was riding really fast during the day and then sleeping 8 to 9 hours every night, which is crazy. And so he finished, and but yeah, that was both of our first races was Silk Road 2022. And then we didn't go together because one was doing it. I think I had learned about it, and then he said he was going, and then I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, I might as well go this year. So I guess in a
Yeah.
way I did go because he was going, but we both had the desire without each other, if that makes sense.
Oh, it's very interesting how our stories are very similar.
I
My husband
know.
was also doing road racing and going super fast, and I was the beginner. So it's really interesting how then you can develop such a nice hobby that not only is a hobby but brings so much into your life, I will say. So that's very nice.
I know, it's so funny how parallel our stories are. And also I think like such a special thing to be able to share it with your partner. I mean, people always say like you're going to get a divorce, that's a bad idea. And I think that, as you said, it it makes everyday life a little bit easier to deal with these challenges in like really heightened circumstances, and you learn to communicate with one another and also have an understanding. And just like I have so much more admiration and respect for him because I know the things that he's pushed through, and I think similarly like him towards me. And to also be like, remember that time we were at the top of a mountain like in the middle of the night and we were staring at the stars, or whatever story it is. I think like we just keep building up this Rolodex of like once in a lifetime experiences, which feels really special.
Mm-hmm. And you did some of the races solo. How does it compare as a pair? What are you will say the cons and pros?
Yeah, I think so. I like to do races in a pair when there's something I want to experience with him. I don't know if I would race with other people in a pair. That's something I've thought about, but it's like it feels kind of risky because, like, I know we know each other so well. But yeah, basically, I like to race in a pair when there's something I want to experience and share the experience. And then solo is kind of I think about that as like, is there something, do I want to spend a lot of time in my own head? Is there something that I'm really working on that like I want space to do on my own? And I think in many ways racing solo is slightly easier, except when you're having a really bad time. Well, I kind of take that back because also like there's nothing worse than being in a pair and you're both having a really bad time, and then it's the
Yeah.
group mentality of like you just doom spiral. Um, but solo, I think, is much more of like a cathartic in your head experience. You spend a lot of time thinking on your own and working through your own stuff. And so I like to do those on my own when I really like there's something I want to work out for myself. And also like I think it's where I like to test my fitness a little bit more because I'm not so worried about how that will impact another person. I can just do what fits the rhythm of my body. And so that's kind of how I think about those things. I don't know what I prefer. I think pairs racing, when it's fun, it's so fun. Like
Yeah.
you can just laugh about everything, but then there's also that feeling of like accomplishment when you race by yourself. So I don't know what I prefer.
Yeah, exactly. And I know you doing a lot of work to encourage more women in the start line of the races. How do you think races and events or the community can help this? I mean, it was amazing in Atlas Mountain Race to see so many women in the start line. I think it's been changing year
Mhm.
on year. There's more women. So, what do you think? Why is the change, and what else can we do about it?
Yeah, I think there's so many things that can be done, and it's easy to say that, people aren't doing enough, but I really think that, like, in my opinion, small consistent actions continue to move the needle forward. I think, campaigns and stuff like that are great, but it's really hard to replicate that energy in day-to-day life. And so I really try to think about, like, what are the little things I can be doing all the time that feel sustainable. One, I think just sharing more diverse stories. That's why I started Detours, because I was like, there's no women hosting bikepacking podcasts.
Hmm.
There's a couple kind of gravel podcasts, but I was like, it's all just dudes with microphones talking about their dude experiences. And that's not to diminish them, but I was like, I don't see myself represented in these stories. And so that's why I started Detours, was just like, I want to hear these stories. I can't be the only one. Uh, and it's been cool to hear so many people respond positively to that, be like, oh, like I relate to so and so. And maybe they don't do a race, but they might start, doing these adventures because they feel like, okay, there's people I see that look like me or sound like me or whatever. So yeah, hearing more diverse stories. On that note, I think like coverage from races is a huge thing. If races can have
Hmm.
50-50 coverage, like equally reporting on the men and the women, that moves the needle, because we need to see the women's race unfold. And frankly, I think that like the women's races are getting more and more exciting.
Yeah.
They're getting like, the field this year at Atlas was so deep. Mariah ended up developing quite a big lead, but like going into the race, I was looking at the list of people who could contend for the win, and I was like, I don't think we've ever seen this many people that could. Um, and of course, it's not just about the people winning, but I think if you see women in these strong positions, then it encourages more people to be like, okay, I believe I can do that too. Yeah, so diverse stories, coverage, and then I think just like resources from races, but also individuals, is people talking really candidly about their experiences, about what it
Hmm.
feels like to be a woman in the outdoors. Like, I feel like all these conversations used to happen behind closed doors.
Yeah.
People didn't talk about their menstrual cycles publicly. And the more we can just break down the walls and actually talk about things like normal people, like all of us as women are experiencing these things. So why do we need to like hide them?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and that's kind of, I think those small things can continue to push things forward. Having women only spaces is really helpful too. Like, I'm sure you've felt this on a start line. I look around and I look to my left and I look to my right, and it's men
Yeah.
everywhere. And I feel so alone. But then I go to a women's only event and you look around and you're like, whoa, there's way more of us than I thought there were. And
Yes.
that's a really empowering feeling. And, people think that maybe having just one gender event is exclusive. And I would say they're really necessary to grow the sports, that people can build confidence in a comfortable environment and then be able to go do these things. So
Yeah.
those are my thoughts on how we can continue to get more women on start lines, and just being really supportive and going from there.
Yeah, exactly. And I really like what you said about showing your vulnerability, because not only heroes can do this. I think sometimes
Yeah.
in a lot of the videos and coverage seems like only superhumans can do these kind of events and do well. But when you see somebody that you can relate to, that had struggles that you had, is like, as you said, I'm not the only one, I'm not alone. Look, they still finished them. For example, I
Yeah.
really found encouraging the story of Megan. She was a roadie and now she's smashing it in the off-road race. Is like, okay, there's hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
even if you learn late, there's still hope to do well if you just put in the effort. And for example, with somebody else, my partner, I really admire him, but when he tells me you can go down this descent, it's like, no, you've been a pro racer, you can, of course you can say I can do that. But when I see somebody like me that used to be like me and then they do it, they find the courage to do it, it really
Mhm.
encourage me, because I think courage is not the lack of fear, but doing it even though you are afraid of it. So seeing somebody like me sharing their stories, or how they cope with similar problems, is really encouraging. I actually
Yeah.
listen a lot of your podcast episodes about Atlas. It was super useful because you were talking about some challenges
Mhm.
perhaps that you have as a woman, more than men. So it was really good to have the information. When you know what can happen, you can be more prepared for these kind of challenges.
Yeah, exactly, and just knowing kind of all of or not knowing all the things that could happen, but I think, like, making them less of a secret and giving people, something to really wrap their head around. Because, like, the unknown, I think, is what so many people are afraid of. Like, obviously, there will always be a small bit of unknown, but if we can at least give some kind of blueprint for people to follow. I also think that, like, there's been this narrative of, finish these races at all costs. And I don't think that actually encourages more people to go and do it. I think that if you have a clear goal and you know what you want to get out of it, regardless of a finish position, like that is just as valuable as finishing, in my opinion. And so removing the pressure of, like, if you go to start an event, you have to finish, I think will drive participation up. Of course, we want to see more and more people finish the race, but it's a lot of pressure to be like, "Oh, I only wanna do it if I'm gonna finish." And I think that we'll see more participation if we can kind of, like, encourage people to just try anyways, and that failing is actually really valuable and really good. Like, it's cool to fail.
Yeah, exactly. I think scratching is a big topic. I think it's very hard mentally. For example, it was the first time I nearly scratched from a race, and it really hurt me. It was like a
Yeah.
burning pain in my heart, just the idea of it. And I think sometimes it's a bit stigmatized. People don't talk about what it actually means scratching from this event. What's your experience? How do you cope with it?
Um, I mean, I've scratched more races than I've finished, so I'm pretty used to the feeling now. That's not to say that it's not disappointing. I try to go into every event with goals beyond finishing. I try to think
Mm-hmm.
about, like, what do I want to get out of this mentally? What do I want to get out of it physically, so that the end result doesn't hinge on me finishing, because that there's just so many things that can happen, especially like in the mountain races when you pick the hardest ones. Um, and then I allow myself time afterwards to be disappointed, to be sad, but then after that kind of week or 2 weeks has gone by, look back and be like, "What are all the amazing things about the experience? What did you actually take away from it that was really positive? Where did you grow as a person? Where did you improve?" And that really helps. Um, and just tuning out the people who are like, "Oh, scratching is bad, da 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 da." I think that, they're entitled to that opinion. It's not one that I hold as well. Uh, but that helps, and then, yeah, that's kinda how I deal with it.
Yeah, and for example, I know you wanted to do again Silk Road, and how do you prepare for this race? What would you say are the key aspects? And if you will go back, which things you won't do again?
I think, honestly, last time I nailed the preparation. I did a really, like, good build with my coach. I look back on my training and it was very consistent, so super happy about that. I packed all the things that I needed to. I, like, took a slightly colder weather kit this time around. Um, so yeah, kit was great, training was great. I did an acclimation block while I was there, so I went and, like, really slow toured and stayed up high. I think that the altitude on the first day always gets people, and I know it's really hard to go and acclimate because it's already like you're flying halfway across the world. It's already a huge chunk of time. But I think if people can go and acclimate, or maybe in your home country, getting used to altitude will just make the experience that much more enjoyable and be much easier on your body. I wish that I had started with cold and flu medication. That's the only thing that I
Mm-hmm.
didn't do. And I'm pretty sure I had COVID before, like, right before the
Oh
race
no!
started. And I started the race that way. And I really
Wow.
needed cold and flu medication, but I couldn't get it until this quite big town after CP1. So I raced for like 5 days, really, really sick,
Oh,
and then
wow.
was able to buy medication. And I was like, damn it, you should have just had that in your kit, especially given all of the factors with Silk Road. Like, I think having a really robust little pharmacy on your bike is only going to help you. It's not going to hinder you. It doesn't matter if it takes up a bit more space or weight, because the likelihood of getting sick or something happening there is just so high.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, other than that, like that's the one thing I would change. Other than that, I was so happy with my preparation. And I think that experience really serves you well in Kyrgyzstan, knowing how it's an amazing country. People are so friendly. It's really chaotic. It can feel
Yeah.
overstimulating. It's like there's this constant buzz, and that can be really jarring. But when you get past that and you can kind of just be like, oh, that's just the way things are, it's a lot easier to navigate. So experience helps if you can get there early, spend some time like getting used to the people and the food and the things. But it's a huge chunk of time, so
Yeah.
it's hard for everyone to do that.
Yeah, I had that experience in Morocco. Once you understand the culture, the climate, and how everything works, it starts to be really easy. So if you've done the race before or you've done some record, that's a huge advantage because it's a different culture. I like the mountain races. For example, Silk Road and Atlas are in completely different countries than your usual,
Yeah.
racing areas. So it's totally unfamiliar. You're just learning about a completely new environment and yeah, adapting to it as you go. So definitely, as you said, adaptation is key. And you were talking about training. How did
Hmm.
you train for it? Did you do more endurance, intensity, focusing on off-road, some strength training?
Yeah, so my training looked like I did 2 strength training sessions a week, and the main reason I started doing so much more strength training is because I got Schirmer's neck at Atlas last year. But also I find that my knees hurt less, I recover faster if I'm strength training, so I did 2 sessions per week. I was doing 2 interval sessions on the bike, and then 2 longer rides on the weekend, and then maybe another endurance ride in there. So I was riding 4 to 5 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
My base kind of level of hours was about 8 to 10 in a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then it would scale up, obviously, as you get closer and closer to, and you build up the weekend long rides. I think my biggest week was like 15 or 16 hours, maybe a little bit more. I
Mm-hmm.
was working full time getting ready for this. Well, I freelance, but I was still working quite a lot. So balancing all those things, I don't think that like you need to do 20 hours a week. I mean, obviously, if you have the time, you can. I think
Yeah.
that interval training is really important. Do I love it? Not really, but I do it because I find that I get the adaptations and it really helps do a little bit less volume uh, than than what would be required if you were to just strictly work on endurance. Um, and then to your point, I do most of my intervals on the road just because it's easier to find. There's some like great climbing around where I live in Vancouver. And then
Yeah.
on the weekends, I try to do both of my rides off road. I'll usually do one on like a faster gravel route and then one on a more like adventurous, climby, hardtail route where, I'm sometimes getting off my bike and walking because there's hike a bike and stuff like that, so that I'm
Yeah.
practicing technical descents and have the variety, because these races do have a mix of like very pedally sections, but also not super technical, but they're big rocky downhills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm so jealous. When I hear you, I can go practice hike bikes and descents. It's like, or about the intervals. I actually prefer to do it indoors because here it's like you just have to go super fast on a flat stretch and you run out of road. But on the
Yeah.
indoor bike, you can really focus on pushing the power. I just turn on my music full volume.
Yeah.
And I know you also find motivation in the races with music. So besides music, what else helps you coping with the tough moments?
uh Music for sure. I think reminding myself to look up and like do a 360 view of everything around me, and that really helps just looking at the landscape. I find if things are really, really hard and I have cell service, I'll call a friend and I'll just say, like, I just need to whine for like 5 minutes and then I'll feel better. Um, I think the only way that like hard moments get easier is just by enduring more of them and keep
Mm-hmm.
continuing to do them and reminding yourself that these things will not last forever. This low that you're feeling, you're going to feel euphoric when you get to the other side of the climb. And I'm a person who feels like really, really heightened emotions. I feel really high highs, which is great, but then you feel really low lows. So I'm trying to work on just like moving my emotional kind of levels more level and have a bit of a baseline so I'm not like going super high and then super low
Yeah.
because it's so devastating when you get to the other side. I mean, the high is really fun,
Yeah.
but the low is just the worst. So, yeah, impermanence is kind of the thing I return to all the time, that nothing's going to last forever. And you just need to embrace the moment for whatever it is and know that it's going to change pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And I actually remember during my podcast with Quinda, who also did Atlas Mountain Race, she
Yeah.
mentioned you that you told her you just have to put a timer and cry out and then continue. It's something that you do.
Yeah, I'll set a 5-minute timer where I'm feeling like really, really bad and be like, you can cry, you can have the worst time ever. You have 5 minutes. And after those 5 minutes, it's over. Now, it's not true that it's totally over after 5 minutes. Sometimes I set more timers, but I do think I think it's really important to feel your feelings and to
Yeah.
have dedicated time to do it. It kind of helps snap you back into reality. So I love the timer method. Sometimes it's more than 5 minutes, it's closer to like 15, 20, 30. But it's certainly a good tool to at least like wrap your head around this isn't going to last forever. And usually, by the like, if things are going well by the end of that timer, I'm like, oh, I feel better now.
Yeah, exactly. I think ultra races brings the deepest emotions in you. I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
roller coaster of emotions, as you said. You have your ups, your downs, and then all of the sudden, it's like a sometimes almost like a religious experience. You're like, "What's happening? I don't know what is
Yeah.
this feeling." So it's quite interesting. Actually, the only time I've seen my husband crying was in an ultra race when we were hiking up a mountain. It's like wow, it just brings out, I love how it brings out this to your nature, to your
Yeah.
primitive instincts. You are not bound by rules anymore. It's just you, your body, nature. So I love how it brings the best in you that you didn't know, and also your deepest emotions. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just looking at the stars and I start crying. It's like, oh, how beautiful is this?
Yeah. These really simple things that you're like, oh, this is amazing, and it reminds you like that life doesn't have to be so complicated. I think
Hmm.
that's why most people love ultras is it's so simple. You ride your bike, you eat, you sleep, and you just take care of yourself. It can feel like very selfish to do these things, but it's so if you strip it all back, it's so simple and you can find joy out of like the littlest things. I think if you lean
Yeah.
into the really little joys, you get so much more out of the race. I mean, I'm sure you run into people who are complaining and saying how hard everything is and da da da. And like, yes, it's hard, but if you like revel in those little moments of like how amazing that omelet was, or how beautiful the stars are,
Yeah.
or just like the sound of gravel, there's all these things that can really just lead you into a positive way and just enjoy the experience and that remind you it doesn't actually take very much to like have a good time.
Yeah, exactly. And you done the three mountain races, and now there's like a new trend, the Nelson Triple Crown. What are your thoughts about this, and why do you think this is getting so popular?
I think people are just competitive and people want some they like to say that they've done a series and they want to, have a benchmark to show people. I think that the races are an adventure and people want to be part of the community. I am doing like the media triple crown this year and it's a crazy amount of
Yeah.
travel and so I kind of am like how are people doing this and still working jobs? But it's really cool. Next year there will be a fourth race in Turkey. So this year we're calling it the triple Nelson, and then next year it's the full Nelson. It's a little bit funny that I think it was maybe just me that said we're calling it something Nelson, and he was like, okay.
I find really incredible that, wow, that's really excited. I actually, when I was in TCR and I rode through some of the gravel roads in Turkey, I was thinking, why nobody's doing a race here? It's so beautiful, and you have a lot of these amazing gravel roads there. I was actually thinking about doing some bikepacking there this year because I was super impressed. I love that
Hmm.
about ultra races. It pushes you, as you said, to go to places you wouldn't go otherwise, or go to the most illogical routes but are super beautiful. So I think
Yeah.
that's an advantage of it. It's like an adventure more than a race.
Yeah, and I think that's just it is about the bike. You obviously need to be able to ride your bike far and ride long days on your bike, but it takes so many more skills than just being able to ride a bike. It's like mental resilience, your ability to repair things, hiking, wilderness skills. It's all of these things. It's not just a bike race. And so I think that that's why, in my opinion, they're gaining popularity, because it's not just like crazy cyclists who can do these things. You see trail runners, you see mountaineers coming to do it. And I hope that the field will keep getting more and more diverse. Obviously, the people who are
Hmm.
winning it are going to be closer to professional cyclists than not. But I think the rest of the field, there's really anybody could do these things if you have a bike, or the right bike, and uh, the determination and the skills to go have an adventure.
And talking about your plans, you were saying you are doing the Triple Crown Media. So what else? I know you have your amazing podcast, Detours. So
Yeah.
what are your plans for the year? Races, media, episodes?
So yeah, I have detours. That is a constant thing I'm working on. I try to release weekly episodes. And then I actually work full time as a podcast producer. So managing my job through all of that, I'm really lucky. It's a remote company. They are really encouraging of doing things that make me feel whole and happy as a person. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been given the green light to go away to Greece to do media for Hellenic. And then I'm going to race Bright Midnight in July.
Oh
So,
wow!
yeah, I'm super excited about that. I'm a little bit nervous because it's like 80 days now until Hellenic. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have all this time at home that I can train. Then I'll be off the bike for a week. I'm going to stay in Europe and just work from Europe until Bright Midnight. So I'll have about a month. So my
Mm-hmm.
training is totally changing because I'm working so much more. And I think my goals and how I approach events will have to shift. But then, yeah, so Norway in July. And then I have a company retreat in Iceland in August. And then I'm flying
Wow!
from Iceland to Kyrgyzstan. And then I will maybe sleep in September. I thought that this year would be less crazy, but is it's going to be crazy.
Wow! And how do you balance all of this recovery from races, work, relationship? Is like I already find it. My whole life is like ultra cycling at work and work. How
Yeah.
do you manage that? Because I'm fortunate. I think like you that our partners have the same hobby, but
Yeah.
otherwise it's quite difficult.
I think that balance is a word that, at least for me, I can't think about balance. I've been coming back to this word harmony lately, and
Mm-hmm.
that I want all the things to work in harmony. And they're not all going to be level, but there's going to be periods of time where I'm riding my bike more and working less, or there's going to be periods of time where I'm working more and riding less, and just finding a way to make them all work together, and knowing that things are not going to feel balanced. But just as long as they can all fit in those puzzle pieces together. It's hard though. I'm very hard on myself. I I mean, I just rattled off a list of way too many things. I think in the next year I would love to be able to get the list of stuff I'm doing down. Now,
Mm-hmm.
is that realistic for who I am as a person? Probably not, because by the time I get the list shorter, I'll probably add some things. Uh, my partner is hugely understanding. He's also incredible in terms of like, he supports our household a lot. There's a lot of nights where I'll be working and he'll be making dinner. And so I'm really lucky that I can work as much as I do and it really fulfills me and energizes me. And he, supports in other areas, which is really, really incredible. I mean, he works hard too, but he doesn't work nearly as much as I do. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm very lucky to have most nights he cooks dinner. We used to cook dinner together every night, and now I'm working like, I don't want to tell you how many hours I work in a week
Oh
because
my
it's
God.
gross, but I do sleep. The one thing that keeps me going through all of this, Sherry, is that I am in bed by 9:30 every night. I am sleeping 8 hours. I don't give a
I
shit
do
if
the
I'm not
same.
done all of my work. Sleep is the thing that keeps me going, and then I am trying to fit in riding and stuff like that, which is, I think now I like intervals better because I'm like, oh, you can get a sweet workout in
Yeah.
90 minutes. I don't need to go do a crazy amount of hours, and then I get fit and I'm happy and I can try and do all of the things, which feels good.
I totally agree. Sleep is a superpower. I'm also religious with my sleep. 10 maximum every day, no more excuse, and we go to bed together. That's really important routine. No one goes to bed and the other, no, no. At 10, both to bed. I
Yep.
think it really helps your body to get a rhythm and recover. For me, it has been a game changer. And to
Mhm.
wrap it up, 10 tips for beginners for the mountain races.
Oh, whoa, 10. Okay. Um the best bike is the bike you have. Everybody's always like, do I need a specific bike to do it? There's bikes that will make it more enjoyable. I think if you have access, which leads me to point 2, if you have access to suspension and bigger tires, I think you'll be happy
Yeah.
with those things. 3, trust yourself. You're never going to feel fully prepared, so just go for it. Okay, number 4, always be snacking. Always be snacking and carry more. Don't carry like
Yeah.
so much food that your bike is crazy heavy, but carry more food than you think and eat it all the time. 5, do your research. There's so much information about the races out there now. 6, don't be afraid to talk to people who have done the events before. Most people are super friendly. So if you find an article that someone's written and you want to know more, message them. 7, take lots of pictures. You'll never take enough. I mean, the photographers do a great job, but everybody gets to the end and they're like, oh, I wish I took more pictures. So take the second, take the photo, even if it's a shitty iPhone photo. You'll love it. 8, take time to like smile and wave at the locals. I think they're so excited that there's people coming to their countries. 9, be in the moment. Like
Hmm.
really embrace the moment. Remember, nothing's permanent. And 10, ride your bike consistently. I think people think they need to do these really big like weekend training and then they burn themselves out. If you're
Yeah.
riding your bike consistently, little things add up to something really amazing, and that's kind of how I like to approach things, is just consistency over these big peaks and valleys will set you up for success. So I think that's my 10.
Oh wow, I love it. Thank you
Cool.
so much, Mel. I'm gonna link in the description below the link to your podcast and
Yeah.
Instagram so people can follow your amazing stories. And maybe we see each other in bright midnight. I'm thinking about doing it, so let's see.
Oh, you definitely should. Thank you so much, Sherry. This was the best. I'm super excited about it. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, give a like, and rate the show if you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and to check all the information and resources we talk about in the link in the description, and exclusive discounts in Bicycle, of course, so you can sell or bike your new bike, and brands like Albion, Redshift, and more. Until the next episode.